As we've been going through the month of May, we've been seeing activity pick up in the Toronto real estate market. And this is actually something we've been seeing for the last probably 6 to 8 weeks or so. However, anytime the media gets attention of it and they start reporting 6 to 8 weeks later, activity does seem to follow as well. I'm Michael Ouzas. I'm a realtor in the Greater Toronto area. If you ever wanted to book a call with me, click on that first link in the description down below. This video will be a little bit of a refresher of the stats from April as we prep to get the May stats, which should be out relatively soon in the month of June. As things have gone on through May, I think we're going to start to bridge the gap between the year-over-year pricing. Now, I do think it's still important to be very market and very micro market specific when running the data because every market is performing differently. Look at the stats for April. We've seen an increase and uptick in February, March, and April. So let's take a look at what these numbers look like in prepping into the May numbers that are coming out very soon. First up, the Greater Toronto Area market stats. First number we're going to take a look at is the total number of sales. We're down about 500 sales from where things were in April of 2022, but down about 5,000 to 6,000 sales from 2021. In 2020, we all knew where things were, and that's why there was a very low number of sales at that point. Active listings just over 10,000, which is about 20% below where things were in 2022. And about 15% below where things were in 2021. Average price year over year down 8%. Compared to 2021, still an increase in price of about $60,000 or about 6% or so from 2021 of April. Months of inventory, and this is a number we're going to be paying attention to and we always pay attention to, is 1.38. So if every property sold in the Greater Toronto Area, we'd be out of properties in about 5 weeks. What that tells me is the absorption is much better than it has been in a while. Now, every micro market and major market is performing very, very differently. Condos pricing also down about 8%, and condo sales relatively flat at just over 2,000. When we look at months of inventory at 1.38 across all home types, that is about an absorption rate of 5 weeks or so. So if every property was to sell, we'd be out of properties in about 5 or so weeks. That rate of absorption is quite high and puts us back into a seller's market. And the stuff that is priced well and looks really good is still very active, especially here in the city of Toronto. As we take a look at the Toronto market stats, number of sales about 2,700, down about 10% from where things were last year at 3,000. Active listings down 6%. Not a massive number of active listings, but puts us back in line with where things were in 2022 and 2021. Average price down about 10% year over year and up about 4% or so from 2021. Still up significantly from 2020. And if we look at condo prices, down about 8% year over year. Again, that months of inventory, about a month and a half. So we'd be out of properties in about a month and a half if nothing else came to market. When we look at the full landscape of all the property types in the 905, which is anything outside a Toronto address, and the 416, which is a Toronto address, the total number of detached sales, just over 3,400. Average price in Toronto, just over 1.7. Average price in the 905, just over 1.4, which brings an average total of 1.49. And this is where I'm only going to go through this one. You can take a look at the rest of the numbers because it is a lot of numbers. But this is where when you see the averages, Toronto proper typically overall has a higher price than the 905. But in the Greater Toronto Area, it does factor in both areas. Year-over-year change across the board, we're hovering around 8-9% down from where things were last year. But every market performing differently, and we get into those month-over-month stats, it's going to tell maybe a bit of a different story. Sales from 2023 to 2022 down about 5%. New listings down 40%. I think this is a super important thing to take note of. Active listings down about 20% and average price down about 8%. We are seeing listing days on market start to get a little bit lower. Things have been moving relatively quicker However, still up from where things were last year. Let's take a look at the average price. And again, we've already talked about this on a month-to-month basis, basically. In February of 2022, which was the peak across the board for the Greater Toronto Area on average, prices started declining throughout the year as interest rates played a major factor here. And they've been relatively flat from July moving forward. Now, if we look at January and December, we saw low sales, prices dropped, and things have been going up relatively consistent since. As we see, the April 2023 numbers were right in line with where things were in June. And if we see another uptick, we might be getting in line with a year over year running a bit flat. Now, that's remained to be seen, and there are many factors at play here. But as these May numbers are going to come out soon, we may be seeing more and more of a flat increase year over year. As you look at the monthly sales data, things in April 2022, we had over 8,000 sales on 13,000 listings. Months of inventory, 1.64, an average sale price of 1.25, 11 days on the market. Now, as the number of sales started decreasing through basically February this year, and then active listings started going up throughout the year and then back down again as we crept through again January, February this year. Months of inventory started to rise, and then we were hovering around the 2 to 3 months of inventory. But now through March and April, we've definitely seen things creep back into that ultra seller territory. For the average price, things were declining all the way through, as we just mentioned. But for the first time, April 2023, we hit 1.15 on average, which brings us above the June 2022 numbers. And remember, last month was the first time we've eclipsed 1.1 million since June as well. We are closing the gap on May 2022, and I would anticipate we might be relatively close to a 1.2 number as the May numbers come out. Overall, when we look at the benchmark pricing for detached in the Greater Toronto Area, we're about in the July 2022 range. For townhouses, we're closer to that August 2022 range, and condos have been relatively flat since about October. Definitely creeping up in the last couple of months. Same story for the detached segment in the Greater Toronto Area. If we look at Toronto proper, it's relatively the same story, except in the detached segment, we're closer to a July 2022 for when it comes to pricing. This is, of course, benchmark, and in December was the low for detached. As we look through townhouses, the peak was actually in May 2022 for townhouses, and with a low in December, and here we are in April, closer to the October number. March 2022 was the peak for condos, with a low coming actually through in February on average for a benchmark price. Now, that could also mean that there are more lower price condos selling, so in the studio and one bedroom territory, but it's still the benchmark price nonetheless. In April, a big jump from February, bringing us back to closer where that October 2022 number was, and actually similar to where things were in January of 2022. And I think that's really important to note. I want to finish off with this chart this month because I feel like it paints more of a picture of what's been happening in the last 3 months. This also goes from condos, townhouses, and single family homes, but it shows how every single market and micro market performs very differently in the city of Toronto. So for example, if you're looking at a condo in W01, you're down about 1.3%, of course, benchmark price in the last 3 months. But if you were looking for a townhouse in the same area, you'd be up about 13% in the last 3 months. And these are always subjective numbers, and every property is relatively different. And of course, there are so many factors when it comes to pricing, but it just paints a picture of how every single micro market performs very, very differently than the other. And every single property type also performs differently, depending on the area, of course, as well. Now, this also could be relative to the number of sales, which has an influence when it comes to benchmark pricing. But anyway, I thought this would be a good chart to finish off with, as it does show a wide variety of ranges and price increases in the last 3 months. So those are the numbers for April. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on where things are headed as we approach the end of May and into June to get the May numbers. I thought this would be a great refresher to do at the end of the month. So that way, when you see the new numbers, you'll see where we came from and where we are going. If you have any questions on a specific market, property type, or something in particular that's relative to you, don't be shy to send a message, send a comment, or click the link in the description down below. I'm Michael Ouzas. Thanks for watching.